Hey y'all, today I'm going to be explaining every single reason why salt is undeniably toxic. So let's get right into it. Before modern times, presenting the idea that salt was beneficial for humans would be met with laughs and ridicule, and for good reason. For example, the Eskimo people eat a diet consisting of zero salt and actually hate the taste of salt. In fact, they hate the taste of salt so much, they purposely avoid salty foods, and this is including natural foods. When researchers were sent to study the Eskimo tribes, they gave them unnatural foods with a high salt content, and all of the Eskimo refused to eat the high salt foods. All the Eskimo, before being modernized, hated, were repulsed by salt. In fact, the Eskimo hate salt so much, the word they use to describe a salty flavor literally means evil tasting. I'm not sure how to pronounce this word. I think it's pronounced mamaitok. But mamaitok is the word they use to describe a salty flavor, and it literally translates to evil tasting. And this is an amazing example because the Eskimo are arguably the healthiest group of people on the planet. Now, they've been modernized recently, but before this, they were the healthiest tribe. They ate a perfect diet consisting of high animal fat, high raw meat. They didn't eat anything else. It was all raw meat, raw animal fat. Now, I can give a million examples of tribes that all hate salt because every single natural human hates salt, but I'll give you one more example. The Bedouins, who live in the desert of the Middle East. These people, when they were presented with the question, why do you not salt your food? They laughed and they said that would be completely ridiculous. And these people live in the desert. This idea that salt is necessary for hydration is disproven by this one group of people who literally live in the desert, and they think the idea of consuming salt is ridiculous. Before we move on, I need to make it clear I am talking about rock salt, not sodium. Again, when I say salt, I mean this crystallized rock, which consists mainly of sodium bound to chloride. I am not talking about sodium. Sodium and salt are two completely different things. Now, even today, most of the modern world is not stupid enough to believe that salt is some kind of health cure or some kind of miracle cure, because it's not. However, a lot of people do believe it's necessary, but this is because they are mistaken between rock salt and sodium. There is this very obvious intentional confusion done in the medical industry to make you believe that sodium and salt are the same thing. But you already understand this. Now, I'd like to give a little story of a man who fooled people into thinking that salt is a miracle cure. Our story starts in 1866 with the birth of a French man named René Quinton, a man born to wealthy parents. He lived an unremarkable childhood in his 20s, spent 10 years trying to be a writer, but got nowhere with his writing. So at age 30, he instead attempted to be a biologist and quickly started fabricating information to fit his medical agenda. Despite never being a medical doctor and taking no training about the human body, Quinton began referring to the sea as the matrix of life. Quinton wrote a book whose name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, but basically in the book he rambles about some nonsense about life coming from the ocean and that the ocean is where humans belong and all this other nonsense. In 1907, Quinton patented something he called serum de Quinton, which was seawater taken from parts of the Atlantic that Quinton claimed to be pure, and then the seawater was transported to Paris, where it was sterilized and stored in vials. This serum de Quinton was meant to be injected into people's bloodstreams to treat the following ailments, according to Quinton. Now, if you can't tell that this treatment is complete bullshit, let me explain why. First, let's start with a little more information about Quinton. The first experiment Quinton ran to test his serum de Quinton was to, quote, remove the totality of a dog's blood and replace it with sterilized seawater. Yeah, what the fuck? Now, there are quite a few things wrong with this, but let me just start by explaining that you can't just remove the totality of a dog's fucking blood and keep it alive. That is fucking ridiculous. Next, salt water literally kills dogs. So if this was ever actually done to a dog, it would literally just make the dog drop dead. Also, it's worth mentioning that Quinton claims after he injected the dog with the seawater, it developed an infection and fever and took 5 days to recover. So make of that what you will. Now, something else I'd like to mention about Quinton is that he's labeled as an aviation pioneer, but he literally did nothing at all for the world of aviation. All he did is he started a little club called Ligue Nationale Aérienne, which translates to National League of Aviation, where he would set up a yearly subscription where he would take these people's money who subscribed, gave them nothing, by the way, and then offer this money as a prize to the first French creator to invent an ideal aircraft. And it literally never went anywhere. He set up meetings to see people's presented aircrafts, right? To see if he would give them the money. But guess what? He fucking died of a heart attack at age 58. And now I think this is a good segue into the actual harmful effects of salt, because this guy who claimed that injecting salt water into your arteries was a good idea, was a miracle cure, literally died of a heart attack at 58. And this is before vegetable oils were even popular. I highly doubt this guy had more than a few tablespoons of vegetable oil in his life. And I don't want to get in trouble, but we all know that potentially, wink wink, potentially vegetable oils have something to do with heart disease. I don't want to get in trouble, so I can't be too blunt about it, but you guys know exactly how I feel about this. You know what, guys? Let's slow down. Before I go exactly into every single little itty bitty reason why salt is bad for you, I want to tell you why people do this. Why do people drink salt water? Why do people inject salt water into their veins? Why do they do this? The simple answer is because salt water legit causes mental insanity. You don't believe me? Let me tell you another story. Near the end of World War II, on the 30th of July in 1945, the ship named the USS Indianapolis was sunk by a Japanese submarine. There were 1,195 crewmen on the ship. Around 300 of them immediately passed away and sank with the ship. The remaining of the crew had to fight for their lives waiting for rescue, and the ship was sunk at 12:15 a.m., so it was pitch black. Now, you may have actually heard of this sinking before. This is what Jaws was based on, but basically what happened was some of these crewmates, something like 150 of them, were eaten by sharks. The other ones, however, died of either dehydration or salt water poisoning. Now, due to improper record keeping in the 40s, some of these numbers are off by 1 or 2 people, so keep that in mind. But approximately 879 men died in total, including the 300 people that went down with the ship. Now, only about 150 men actually died from shark attacks, and this is on the high end because it's theorized it could be as low as only a few dozen men. But if we subtract that minus the 300 people that went down with the ship, we got a number of 429 individuals dying of either dehydration or saltwater poisoning, or a combination of both. Now, granted, some of them probably drowned, but these were trained soldiers, Navy men who all knew how to swim, so I highly doubt a lot of them died from drowning. Most of it was a mixture of dehydration and saltwater drinking. Now, this next part's going to be a little graphic, so prepare yourself mentally, but the men that drank the seawater developed severe psychosis, delirium, mental insanity, whatever you want to call it. Their mind stopped working properly, and they began to do this. They began, I can't say these words on YouTube, but they began to, swim to the bottom of the ocean to end their lives. And the other men literally tried to, I can't say that word on YouTube. They began to do that to other men. And then other men would take other men's legs and drag them into the ocean with them. Listen, I have to really be careful with my words here to not get banned, but these men that drank the ocean water started doing horrific things. That's all. That's what I'm gonna leave it at. If you want to read about this, I highly suggest it. I'll leave some sources in the description about the USS Indianapolis sinking, because this is fascinating. This is like the best case study of proving that salt water legit causes mental insanity. Now, on a lighter note, I got one more story to tell you, a happy one, a success story of a man who was stranded at sea. José Salvador Alvarenga was stranded for 438 days at sea in 2014. He was on a fishing boat and he got swept away by a thunderstorm. Now, Jose had one other passenger in the boat with him, but unfortunately the passenger ended his own 4 months into the voyage because he had lost all hope. However, Jose did not lose hope. They originally had food on the boat, but they had to dump all of it because it was not allowing them to properly navigate the boat. So what Jose had to do was live exclusively on bird, fish, turtle meat, and for hydration he drank his own urine, a little bit of rainwater, and turtle blood. Now, the main reason I bring up Jose's story is because in his entire 438-day voyage, he not one time drank any seawater, not even once. And this is exactly how Jose was able to survive those 438 days. Had he began to drink that ocean water, he would have developed severe psychosis and likely jumped into the ocean. Here's a cute photo of Jose sometime after his incident. He looks healthy and happy. I hope he's doing great now. Now, we can finally move on to the physiological effects of salt. And to tie up what I said earlier about Quinton dying of heart failure, it is well proven that salt damages the heart and leads to heart failure when large amounts are consumed regularly. Salt is so toxic, it increases heart rate and blood pressure, and this is the body's way of dealing with the toxicity. However, this biological process puts stress on the heart, and when done regularly for a long time, it can lead to heart failure, especially if you have other things in your diet that damage your heart or your arteries. Now, on the topic of blood and arteries, I want to talk about the fact that salt kills red blood cells. Aajonus claims that 1 grain of salt kills 1 million red blood cells. Now, at first, this might sound crazy and unbelievable. What do you mean it kills 1 million red blood cells? That sounds ridiculous. But here's the thing. You have trillions of red blood cells. Do you know what the difference between a million and a billion is? Here, I'll give you an example. A million seconds is 11 days. A billion seconds is 31, almost 32 years. That is a huge difference. Now imagine the difference between billion and trillion. Now let's do some simple math. A grain of salt weighs roughly 50 micrograms. There are 1,000 micrograms in a milligram, which means there are 20 grains of salt in a milligram. And 1,000 milligrams makes a gram, meaning there are roughly 20,000 grains of salt in a gram. And in 25 grams of salt, there is 500,000 grains of salt. And remember this number. Now, the reason why I bring up 25 grams is because this is how much salt 50% of the population needs to die. This is the LD50. And LD50 is an amount that 50% of the population, if given, would die. The 50% that doesn't die, it's because they need a larger dose. So most people, if they eat 25 grams of salt to the face, will get heart failure and die. A few people might need a little bit more. Some people might need 30 grams to die. But 50% of the population, if they take 25 grams to the face, they will die of heart failure. And I want to make it clear that an LD50 of 25 grams is extremely small. It's so small that it happens accidentally all the time. I'll even put up a little video I found of a guy talking about a family member that had to go to the hospital from salt.
He ate an entire tray of lasagna one day, like in front of us. Like throughout the day at Christmas, he ate the entire tray of lasagna. Then he slept at my house and he woke up in the middle of the night with chest pains. Him and his wife, my stepmom, were, wake me up and like, Dad's, I don't know what's going on. Like he can't walk. He's like he's going, can't breath, chest pain, right? Goes to the hospital. They, hook him up to the machines, whatever, do some tests, stays overnight. They call me the next day. They said, hey man, we're sorry. Looks like your dad here has congestive heart failure. I walk in and the people are there, the doctor, and I say, I was briefed, I understand he has congestive heart failure. Like, what do we have to do? Can you explain that to me? And they were like, you know what? We reran the test. We had given him a diuretic. Your father had eaten so much sodium in one sitting that it made I swear to God, it made our machines convince us that he had congestive heart failure, but in fact he had eaten so much sodium because of the food that he ate that this diuretic, once the fluid cleared, he has a slight arrhythmia, but nothing like congestive heart failure. That was purely from the sodium.
And now I would like to give you a list of compounds, mostly psychoactive drugs, that have a significantly higher LD50 than salt, which means you can take more of these compounds than salt and live to tell the tale. So let's start. Phenibut, which is a Russian cosmonaut drug similar to alcohol, 50 grams. THC, no LD50 has ever been discovered. LSD, no LD50 has ever been discovered. Psilocybin, no LD50 has ever been discovered. Aspartame, 700 grams. petrol 980 grams, kratom 895 grams, creatine 120 grams, monosodium glutamate aka MSG 1120 grams, white cane sugar 2449.4 grams. Now, I do want to dispel one myth because somebody is definitely going to try and call me out for this, but there are rat studies that suggest the LD50 of salt is well over 100 grams. However, these are rat studies. Rat studies are incredibly inconsistent when it comes to LD50s. They cannot be trusted. Actual studies done on human beings found that as little as 25 grams would cause heart failure. Now, remember when I told you that 25 grams of salt has 500,000 grains of salt in it? Well, when you translate that to how many red blood cells it'll destroy, 25 grams of salt destroys 500 billion red blood cells. And remember that you have 20 to 30 trillion red blood cells. So when you actually reach the salt LD50, it's still not even close to destroying all the red blood cells in your body. So people need to stop dismissing aajonus's idea as ridiculous because it is clearly not. When you think about the LD50, 25 grams all at once, it is still nowhere near complete and total red blood cell destruction. But I understand why people that drink salt can't figure this out. Like their brains are so destroyed that they can't do simple large number math. And now, even though consuming salt won't destroy all your red blood cells, it is obviously still harmful to your red blood cell count because every time you destroy your red blood cells, the body has to make new waste nutrients. Every time you consume salt, you are wasting nutrients because the body has to utilize nutrients that it would have used in other parts of the body to make new red blood cells. And this brings me into my next point. You cannot detoxify your body when you consume salt. And the reason why is because the salt causes so much destruction in your body. Your body has to focus on repairing the damage caused by the salt, and it does not have time to detoxify and repair other parts of the body. And now the thing that's so brutal about salt consumption is not only does it cause mental insanity, but because it stops detoxification, it can make you feel better. Now, something I've noticed personally, if you look around, you're going to notice this too, but almost every single person I know who fell for the salt drinking trend, they got a certain medical injection that came out 5 years ago that was allegedly, YouTube don't ban me, allegedly responsible for people having heart attacks and just dropping dead. Now, I suspect the reason why they feel better on the salt, not only is it the mental insanity, the psychosis that reinforces it, but it stops their detoxification, and that's why they feel better. So these people are never going to detoxify the injection. They're never going to detoxify any part of their body, and they're going to continue being like, oh, I feel so good. It's so brutal. It's brutal. It's so brutal. Now, relating to this topic, I want to talk about the effect of salt on the brain. Aajonus says that 85 to 90% of all headaches on a daily basis that normies have are caused by salt. And this is because when you consume salt and the sodium is removed from the chloride in the bloodstream, the body sends the sodium to the brain. And the body has to detach the sodium from brain cells to detoxify, because if you get too much sodium in the brain, it'll cause severe brain damage and kill you. When you were on the normie diet, if you ever noticed when you went a couple hours, 5-6 hours without eating, you'd get headaches. The reason why is because the body took that time as an opportunity to remove the sodium. And now this is off topic, but this is the reason why normies feel good while they fast. And this is why fasting has detoxification properties, because normies stop eating their garbage food and the body finally has time to detoxify itself. But when you're on the diet, strict, fully raw, the body can do this process 24/7. It's like you're fasted all the time. But that's off topic. Now, I've heard Aajonus say before that there was a study done where they found clumps of brain cells in the urine of people attached to sodium. Now, this is when the body removes the sodium from the brain. So sodium from the salt, the excess sodium, causes brain damage. And you know what? Speaking of sodium, now is a good time to talk about the mineral content of salt. Salt has basically 0 minerals in it other than sodium and chloride. If you look at the actual amount of these compounds inside of salt, it's less than 1%. It's like 0.2% of salt has any sort of mineral in it outside of sodium. It's so low. If you look up the mineral content of salt, it'll tell you it's 60% chloride and 40% sodium, and it leaves no room for anything else because there's literally nothing else in salt. But you know what else is in salt? Heavy metals. But we'll get back to that in a second. Hold on. Now, the salt I'm going to be using to analyze the mineral content is going to be a French sea salt. Now, the first mineral is magnesium, which is magnesium chloride, which is not the best form of magnesium, by the way, but that's irrelevant. In 100 grams of this salt, there is a reported 34 milligrams of magnesium. 100 grams of salt is enough to kill 4 people. And in the amount that you can kill 4 people with, there's a measly 34 milligrams. A cup of coconut water, 8 fluid ounces of coconut water, like half the size of this fucking thing, gives you 60 milligrams of magnesium. One average sized banana has 37 milligrams of magnesium. If you're eating salt for minerals, you're crazy. But look, let's cover some more minerals. In 100 grams of sea salt, there's 109 milligrams of potassium. Do I even need to explain this one? In like one tiny ass little banana, there's like 400 or 500 milligrams of potassium. Now, how about calcium? It says 287 milligrams per 100 grams. Again, you can get hundreds of milligrams of calcium from 1 cup of milk, dude. And then this is fucking per 100 gram. Like that, crazy. And now iron, there's 11 milligrams per 100 grams, but a lot of people don't know the iron inside of salt is literally heavy metals. It's literally because of ocean pollution. It's literal iron, like iron filings, like literal iron. That's the iron that's in salt. It's not heme iron, the one that's found in animals. It's literally heavy metals, but you know, whatever. And then zinc is found in trace amounts with 350 micrograms per 100 grams, less than 1 milligram of zinc. That's hilarious. And one oyster, according to the Department of Agriculture, contains 16.6 milligrams of zinc. And 100 grams of salt, enough to kill 4 people, has 350 micrograms, which is less than a milligram. Yikes. And now, just to sprinkle a little salt into your wounds, these minerals aren't even usable. The tiny little pubic hair amount of minerals in salt, not usable. The reason is because, first of all, they are not in the most bioavailable form, and second of all, they are 99% of the time cauterized in the process used to make salt. The way they mass produce salt is by boiling it. They get seawater, they put it in a pan, and they boil it. And if they don't do that, the only other way is to sun dry it, which the sun will cook it. It is cauterized. That's why salt is hard like a rock. You don't see that it's hard. That's why salt causes kidney problems, and we'll get to that later. Listen, I can talk about salt all day. There's so many things wrong with it. But the reason it's hard, sharp like a crystal, is because it's cauterized. The minerals are unusable. The minerals are all cooked. They're heated. They're denatured. You cannot use them. Not even, like I said earlier, not to mention, the minerals aren't even in their most bioavailable form. And you know, I just mentioned that salt is hard like a rock, and that's a good segue into my next point. Salt is literally a rock. That's what it is. I mean, did you guys ever go to kindergarten? Like, did any of you guys go to elementary school? Because I'm starting to feel like a lot of people didn't. Because in elementary school, don't you remember they taught us about erosion? They taught us about the fact that the reason why the ocean is salty is because it breaks down the walls of rocks, of boulders, and then they get the little microparticles of it, and that's the salt. Salt is like the broken down rocks. Did you guys never like learn about this? And now salt is so much of a rock that much of the underground layer of our earth is made of salt because it is literally a rock. For example, there is the Lewin salt deposit, which I don't think I pronounced that correctly. I'll put it up on screen. But it's a humongous portion of a salt. It's like a huge salt layer that runs from the Gulf Coast to Texas to the Florida Panhandle. It's fucking huge. And now the next thing I want to talk about is the fact that salt has heavy metals. Now, the exact amount of heavy metals is essentially impossible to know because these people are real sneaky. For example, when they test for heavy metals, instead of being like, oh, there's 15 micrograms, they'll do parts per million or parts per billion. But parts per million and parts per billion can literally mean anything. For example, they found that Redmond's real salt has 500 parts per million of aluminum, which is extremely high for a parts per million, but it can mean anything. Parts per million can mean micrograms, it could mean less than micrograms, it could mean milligrams, who knows, but it's extremely unprecise. Now, I was able to find accurate results for lead. In Celtic sea salt, there's 4.87 micrograms of salt per 1.5 teaspoons, which is 6 grams. So in 6 grams of Celtic sea salt, there's 4.87 micrograms of lead. In Redmond's real salt, there's 2.22 micrograms in 6 grams. And in Baja Gold, there's 2.97 micrograms of lead per 6 grams. And now the reason why this heavy metal content is even there in the first place, which is something I neglected to mention earlier, is because the oceans are polluted as hell. The ocean is the most polluted part of this planet. Anything you consume out of the ocean is polluted and loaded with heavy metals. Now, when you eat meat from the ocean, fish, thankfully you do not absorb the majority of heavy metals. However, with salt, you absorb all the heavy metals. That small amount of heavy metal, for example, the nearly 5 micrograms of lead in 6 grams of sea salt, is probably how much heavy metals you get after eating like an entire fish raw. The next thing I want to talk about is that salt is an antibiotic. This is why people used to use salt to preserve their meat, because people would prefer the fresh meat, and if you coat meat in salt, it does not ferment. It's because it is an antibiotic. Every time you consume salt, you are killing bacteria and other microorganisms inside of your stomach. And the reason the salt kills these microorganisms like bacteria cells is because it pulls the water out of these cells, killing them. This is why salt is dehydrating. Anyone that tells you that salt is hydrating, their brain is not working properly, because salt pulls water out of your cells. It does not put water into the cells. Sodium is responsible for putting water into the cells, but salt does not do that, because the sodium inside of salt is hardly used. You use like 2 or 3% of the sodium in salt. And the way you know this, you can prove this with a logical experiment. If you consume like 10 grams of salt like these people do, that's about 4,500 milligrams, 4,000 milligrams, something like that, of sodium. If you consume that naturally, like, you die. That's impossible. There is no raw food in this world where you could consume that much sodium without other minerals. It's because you can only digest a small portion of it. So salt, the actual physiological effect of the salt, of the rock salt, is that it pulls water out of cells. So it is dehydrating, and this is why it kills microorganisms. Your cells are microorganisms, and it kills cells by dehydrating them. And you know, on what I just said, a logical experiment you could use to prove that salt is harmful is name me one single natural food with a salt content. You cannot name one because it doesn't exist. Salt is literal rocks. There is no natural food with rocks on it. There is no salt in meat. There is no salt in fruit. There is no salt in vegetables. There is no salt anywhere but underground and in the sea. And not to mention, salt is inorganic. Salt is non-organic material. All other food humans eat is organic material. And now I want to mention something I forgot to talk about earlier, but I'm talking about it now. Consider this a benefit for watching the whole video, but salt causes unnatural releases of adrenaline in the brain. It's believed that salt can stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, which also, salt is essentially a stimulant along the lines of caffeine or nicotine. It's so weak, it's not even considered a psychoactive substance, but it's a nervous system stimulant, as you can see here, which produces more adrenaline. And this is the majority of the way that caffeine and nicotine work. They're central nervous system stimulants, which cause a release of adrenaline. It gives you energy and euphoria. Adrenaline is a euphoric compound. However, adrenaline, especially in excess, is highly toxic to the brain. Adrenaline can be extremely neurotoxic. And not to mention the other things that salt does to your brain. Salt is neurotoxic just based on the fact it has this adrenaline release. Now, there's another thing I want to address. People love to send me videos of goats and sheep and cows and shit like that licking rocks and be like, look, salt is natural. The cow is eating salt. Look, it's natural. Number one, Those are herbivores. We are not herbivores. Herbivores can become slightly sodium deficient from their all-vegetable diet. However, it's highly unlikely. The thing with salt is that there is some kind of biological quirk that the salt has this flavor that tricks animals into thinking it's full of minerals, that it's very healthy. And salt can be sort of beneficial for these herbivorous animals, but no more than a few licks worth of this salt is what these herbivorous animals eat. And now I've also seen people claim that predators go to salt licks to lick them. This is complete bullshit. The predators go to these salt licks to hunt herbivorous animals. And on that topic, something extremely fascinating I heard about. In the border regions of India and Bangladesh, there are Bengal tigers that have an extreme thirst for human blood. They are extremely violent and have no chill whatsoever. And there is a high salt content in the water they drink from. And it's theorized this salty water is why they have no chill whatsoever. Now, this hasn't been 100% proven, but to me it makes perfect sense. Considering the fact that we know salt causes psychosis in humans and violence in humans as well when overconsumed, it makes perfect sense to me. The proponents of this theory also bring up the fact that the tiger's kidneys and liver is being damaged by the salt. And that brings me to maybe the final topic of this video. But salt, because it is a cauterized crystal rock, destroys the organs it comes in contact with, specifically the kidney. In fact, salt does so much damage to the kidneys that you will find clumps of kidney cells inside of your urine every time you consume salt. Alright, y'all, so that's it for today, but I do want to mention I made a Rumble at residentraw. I haven't posted anything on there yet because it's late at night. I need to go to sleep soon, but I had a video get deleted by YouTube. So I'm going to put that video on Rumble the day after this video comes out. So, hey, tomorrow, look for that Rumble video. But, hey, I appreciate y'all so much. This video is like my magnum opus. Granted, you know, it wasn't the most perfect video ever. I'm not perfect, but I'm proud of this video. It was extremely informative. If you still think salt is good for you, I don't know what to tell you. But hey, I appreciate you. I love you guys. I love y'all. I'll see y'all some other time. Bye-bye.